Welcome to the road to 1 million US dollars. Let's get right into the Bitcoin chart for today, starting on this 1 day time frame for Bitcoin, because currently we are still seeing some resistance around this level here between 104.5k and 106,000 in the Bitcoin price. Now, so long as we do not get a daily candle close above that 106k level, ideally above 107k, then we have to be open to the possibility of more downside here. For example, to a big level of support like this, setting from 100k all the way down to 99,000. Although, of course, we should take into consideration the lower time frames, which I will get to in just a second here, but I want to start off with a bit more of this 1 day time frame, because we should also take a look at the RSI momentum indicator for Bitcoin, which has still broken this downtrend and is actually still above that descending trend line. So currently this is bullish in my personal opinion on this 1 day time frame. Now, the invalidation for this, where you will see me flip more bearish on this 1 day time frame, is if we actually break below this descending trend line in the RSI, because that would be a bearish warning signal as far as I'm concerned. So again, the most bullish outcome right now is if we get a daily candle close above 107,000, because for me personally at least, that would be the bullish confirmation that likely we are going to see much higher price action for Bitcoin after that. But until then, I am completely open-minded about possible downside scenarios as well. Now, let's move on to this 4-hour time frame for Bitcoin, because we saw some pretty insane price action here today. First of all, we saw a break to the downside of this symmetrical triangle pattern. Here we got about a 2% move to the downside and then bounced from this ascending line of support that I, of course, also mentioned yesterday. After that, we actually saw an invalidation of that bearish breakout and actually broke out to the upside. However, after that, we actually invalidated that. So obviously, this has been a pretty insane day of price action. Now, do keep in mind that this was a 3% move to the upside and this was a 2% move to the downside. So obviously, on leverage for the scalpers that are watching my videos, yes, this was still an interesting opportunity regardless. I mean, just in general, the lower time frames here, people that are scalping and trading on leverage, they are just like loving these swings that we're getting on the lower time frames here. But either way, that's not the point of this video here. For now, what we need to do with this pattern is simply cross off this price target because it has been invalidated. And in fact, after us seeing this breakout to the downside, then to the upside, invalidating both of them, I'm going to consider this pattern to no longer be relevant. Now, at the same time, we do have a bigger triangle pattern here. So notice how I aligned it with these new candles that have been created here on the 4-hour time frame. And yes, technically we are still inside this pattern. Now, am I loving that I have to redraw this trend line and now look at the same pattern basically? No, I am not loving that. But at the same time, I have to respect what I see in front of me in terms of the technical analysis, because that is simply the system that I use. So in terms of a breakout price target to the upside, that is at about 112,000 in the case we break out above 104.6k. And in terms of a breakout price target to the downside, that is all the way as low as about 93.5k if we break below 101.6k. Now, if you want to learn more about some of the details of a symmetrical triangle pattern like this, I highly recommend you watch yesterday's video. It is called Watch Before the Next 48 Hours, because in this video, I specifically cover most of the details that you need to consider when you are trading a symmetrical triangle pattern. And yes, even though this is a different pattern than the one I was talking about yesterday, at the same time, it is still the same pattern with the same characteristics. So therefore, if you missed that video, go and check that out. Next, taking a look at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map. First of all, on this 1 year time frame, notice how we do still have a bunch of liquidity to the downside, sitting at 88k in the Bitcoin price. So yes, we took out a lot of liquidity to the downside on that move down to 89k, but we left some of that liquidity there. So that's just a long-term type of consideration to just take note of, to the fact that that is simply there in the charts. Now zooming in all the way to this 3 day time frame, currently we have some liquidity to the downside as well as to the upside, but most of the liquidity is in fact to the upside, sitting at 106.5K. In terms of the liquidity to the downside, that is sitting at 100.7K. So both of these levels could be interesting targets that the Bitcoin price is getting attracted to, but do take into consideration this symmetrical triangle pattern that I talked about earlier. So if you start seeing that breakout, potentially it could be targeting this 106K level. In the case we break out to the downside, it could be targeting this 100K level, roughly speaking, just as some short-term price targets, while keeping these longer term price targets in mind. But of course, that is not financial advice. I'm simply telling you what I'm seeing in the charts, and you can do with that information what you like. Lastly, let's take a look at the Bitcoin ETF flow tables. Yesterday, we saw a net inflow of close to $250 million into the Bitcoin ETFs. And so long as we continue to see these massive inflows of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin being bought every single weekday, then obviously over time, this is going to have an upwards pressuring effect on the Bitcoin price. Either way, this has been today's market update. Thank you very much for watching once again, and I will see you tomorrow in the next one.